You ever get that feeling like, you've got your digital life all sorted out, like
Yeah.
juggling all these different apps and tools, finally feeling kind of, optimized,
Uh-huh.
and then bam, someone comes along with this totally different approach that just throws everything you thought you knew out the window.
I know that feeling.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. Like how one person completely overhauled their tech setup. They ditched a bunch of familiar tools and went all in on this new system. They called it CLA with MCPs.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. Really interesting case. Actually, they started paying for windsurf back in December.
Windsurf.
Yeah, but their records show their usage just plummeted after like a really short initial burst.
Not a gradual thing.
Nope, it was super abrupt.
So what was the turning point?
They got really into CLA with MCPs. MCPs, from what I understand, are basically like custom-built connectors, sort of like adapters that let CLA, which I think is a large language model, talk to other software, to automate things.
So giving the LLM the power to actually do things within their system, right?
Exactly. That's exactly the kind of integration for driving efficiency we've been all about at StoneFly for over 20 years. I mean, it's a core principle behind our SAN technology, right?
Absolutely. And the benefits this user reported were pretty amazing. They were able to run these really long processes, like without hogging their system resources. Plus, they had direct access to their file system for some seriously intricate stuff.
Like what?
Well, think like deep code-based analysis, auto-generating documentation, even whipping up those really helpful high-level diagrams we were talking about before.
Oh, right, right.
And get this, they were editing code across multiple files, even across different repositories.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, that kind of efficiency gain really makes you stop and think, like, am I doing this right?
I can see why they switched.
Oh, they gave this killer example too. They migrated a ton of code, like 30 files, something like 3,500 lines from some old frameworks to vanilla JavaScript, and they barely had to do any manual fixing afterward. Yeah, it's a powerful example of how just changing your approach and integrating things can completely transform how you work.
Definitely. And it really underscores what we've learned at StoneFly.
Yeah.
Combining different functionalities within one system can seriously boost your productivity. And it's not just about data storage either. We've been providing that for over 20 years. It's about integrating the tools to make the data actually useful for our customers. Which reminds me.
This deep dive is sponsored by StoneFly.
Yes. StoneFly has been leading the way in SAN technology for over 2 decades, providing super reliable and innovative storage solutions. As technical engineers here, we totally get the value of integrated and efficient systems. You can learn more about all that at i-scuds-c.com or stonefly.com.
So how did this person even set all this up?
Well, they didn't just grab some off-the-shelf MCT server, they actually built their own.
From scratch.
Yeah, it shows how flexible this approach is, really tailoring solutions to your needs. Kind of like how we customize storage solutions for our customers at StoneFly.
Makes sense. Did they mention what they were automating?
Oh, yeah. They were doing some pretty intense tasks, like encoding videos, the kind of thing that can take forever. But they also used it to really dig deep into massive code bases.
Not just reading through it all.
No way. They were having the LLM generate documentation and those diagrams we talked about.
Yeah.
And they were editing code across multiple files and repositories. Remember, that was super valuable for that code migration project.
It's amazing how much they were able to do just by connecting different tools together. It kind of reminds me of how StoneFly's been building versatile solutions that can handle all sorts of customer needs for over 20 years now.
It totally does. So they actually shared some numbers on how using MCPs changed the way they used CLA. They said their overall usage went way up.
Way up, huh?
Yeah. Like they had about 200 chats in total, and half of those happened in the last 3 months alone.
That's a lot. So using MCPs really boosted their engagement with the LLM.
Right. They even figured out that their usage went up 5-fold since they started using MCPs.
5 times. Wow, that really shows how much more they were able to get done with this new approach. Like giving the LLM the power to interact directly with their system just unlocked all this potential. It really reinforces what we believe at StoneFly,
Yeah.
It's not enough to just give customers the storage infrastructure. You need to provide the tools to actually use that data effectively.
What's really cool is that they didn't keep this all to themselves.
Oh.
They actually published their MCP server on NPM and SMI. It's like
Right.
they wanted to share this awesome thing they built with everyone else.
Very generous.
It was a hit too. Their server shot up to 7th place and got something like 3,000 downloads.
Wow. Clearly, other people saw the value in what they created.
And they made it really easy to use. All you needed was a couple of common tools and one terminal command, and you were good to go. That probably helped a lot with its popularity. At StoneFly, we're big on making our solutions easy to use. Just like this MCP server. We've been focused on that for over 2 decades with our SAN technology. We want things to be powerful and feature-rich, but also user-friendly.
So what were some of the specific things they were doing with all this?
Well, they talked about exploring unfamiliar code bases, which is something every developer has to do at some point. They found that using CLA with their custom MCPs was really helpful for this, especially when it came to generating diagrams with Mermaid.js.
I can see how visuals would be super helpful for understanding a new code base.
Definitely. And they showed how it worked by having CLA analyze its own code repository. It's a really concrete example. They just gave it the location of the repository and told it to explore it, create diagrams with Mermaid.js to explain what it does and how it's structured. Pretty neat, huh?
Did CLA just start doing all this right away?
Well, the first time it needed to use a new command, it would ask for permission.
Oh, that's good. Like, hey, can I use this tool to do this?
Exactly. It's a great way to give the user control over what the LLM can do.
Smart. What kind of diagrams did it generate?
They mentioned component diagrams, both detailed and high level, to show how different parts of the system fit together.
Okay.
And sequence diagrams to illustrate the flow of execution, including the terminal commands it was running and what files it was editing.
Interesting.
They also got diagrams about the file structure and even the overall server architecture. These visuals are really helpful for understanding how a complex system works. At StoneFly, we use similar diagrams all the time for documentation and to help our customers visualize their data infrastructures.
Right. A picture is worth 1,000 lines of code or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. They were particularly impressed with the terminal command execution sequence diagram. It showed how the CLA desktop app sent the command, including the specific command, and how long it was allowed to run.
And that's where their custom MCP server really shines, right?
Exactly. The server checks the incoming command against a list of allowed commands, so it's not running any rogue code. Then, if everything looks good, it kicks off a new process on the operating system. But here's the important part. It sends back the process ID and any initial output right away, even if the command hasn't finished yet.
So CLA isn't just sitting there twiddling its thumbs, waiting for the command to finish.
Nope. It can keep working on other stuff while that command runs in the background. And if they want to see how it's going, they can use that process ID to get updates from the MCP server.
Ah, smart. That's really efficient. It reminds me of the kind of resource management we've been building into our SAN solutions at StoneFly for over 2 decades.
I know, right? To see how different things were, the user tried doing the same code-based exploration with Windsurf, that tool we talked about before.
Interesting. Apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, they had to write a more specific prompt, though. They had to ask for an HTML file with the diagrams, because Windsurf couldn't just show them directly in the chat.
So, a bit more awkward to work with.
Yeah, and their first attempt actually gave them an error.
Yeah.
It did eventually make the diagrams of, component diagrams, folder structure, sequence diagrams. But they said it was way less reliable with bigger projects, like it would lose track of what was going on and throw more errors.
Compared to CLA with the MCPs?
Yeah. And they also didn't like that they had to open the entire project in Windsurf and wait for it to load. With CLA, they could just give it the folder path and it would take care of the rest. So it felt slower and clunkier overall.
Less streamlined.
Totally. Which, is something we really focus on at StoneFly. We want our solutions to be efficient, but also as frictionless as possible for the user. That's been a core part of our design philosophy for over 20 years.
Makes sense. So, did they only use this setup for working with code?
Actually, no. They tried something you wouldn't normally do with code editor's video encoding. That's what really shows the power of having these custom MCPs.
Oh, how so?
Well, they had this huge video file, like 2.5 gigabytes and 16 minutes long. Yeah. And they used CLA and their MCP server to compress it.
How'd they do that?
CLA started by analyzing the file, using terminal commands, figure out the size, duration, bitrate, all that stuff, using FFmpeg. Then it actually started the compression process. It chose the codecs and set all the parameters, all through the MCP server.
So basically, CLA was running a bunch of system commands in the background.
Exactly. But remember, it wasn't a blocking operation. The user could just tell CLA to start encoding and then go do something else.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and CLA could still track the progress. It would use the process ID it got from the MCP server to check in on the encoding every now and then.
So they could just pop in whenever they wanted to see how it was doing.
Yep. And the results were incredible. The file size went down by 91%. That 2.5 gigabyte file was shrunk to just 237 megabytes.
That's impressive.
Yeah. It shows how powerful it is to be able to use system tools directly through the LLM. That flexibility, handling all sorts of files and tasks, video manipulation, image editing, software installation, even just basic system commands, makes the MCP server a super powerful desktop commander. This is the kind of unified control and automation that StoneFly has been providing to customers for over 20 years through our SAN technology.
Bringing it back to that code migration project, that was a pretty big undertaking, wasn't it?
Definitely. Remember, it was going from an older TypeScript React code base to plain JavaScript.
Right.
The user explained they used CLA in several stages. First, it analyzed the old project to figure out how it worked. Then it looked at the new vanilla JS project. And finally, it did the actual migration, moving the features over.
They said it was something like 5,000 lines of code across 50 files originally.
Yeah, and they got it down to 30 files in the new version. It shows how this CLA-MCP combo can handle some really complex code manipulation across an entire project.
So pretty much anything you can imagine doing with code, you can do with this setup, huh?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
They even did this really cool live coding experiment. They built a whole web page with webcam access that let you draw with hand gestures using this library.
So they weren't just modifying existing code, they were creating something completely new.
Yeah, from scratch. The first prompt was really simple, just to create a new folder and project for a full-screen webcam that could detect hand gestures for drawing.
Okay.
And get this, CLA actually created the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, and even opened the web page in a browser.
Just like that.
Yeah, they were up and running right away.
Mm.
Then they started refining it by just talking to CLA. Like they said, hey, can you make a circle around my pointing finger that changes size based on how far my hand is from the camera?
Cool.
They also added an open palm gesture to erase with a circle that scaled too. They got rid of some gestures they didn't need, like two-finger gestures and thumbs up, and they even fixed a bug where the eraser was drawing in black instead of erasing.
So it was a real back-and-forth conversation between them and the LLM.
Totally. And they could either have CLA rewrite the entire file or just edit specific parts of the code. Then, once they were happy with it, they had CLA deploy it to a popular online platform.
They put it online.
Yeah. CLA created a new repository, added all the files, wrote commit messages, pushed the changes, and even enabled a feature to make the page public.
So they went from idea to live demo entirely through conversation with the LLM.
Exactly. It's a whole new way of thinking about software development, using these intelligent agents to do all the heavy lifting.
Pretty mind-blowing. So what did they say they liked most about this CLA with MCPs setup?
They said the biggest advantage was being able to run these long-running processes in the background, something you can't do with most coding tools. They described CLA as being more of an open box, meaning it was way more flexible and could do a wider range of things. That's similar to how we think at StoneFly. We want our solutions to be open and adaptable so our customers can solve their own unique problems. It's something we've believed in for over 20 years.
Did they have any complaints?
Well, they did say that a dedicated code editor like Cursor might be better for code suggestions and auto-completion.
Makes sense.
But they weren't really into that kind of workflow anyway.
Fair enough. Did they mention what they were planning to do next with their setup?
Oh, yeah. They were going to add code retrieval directly into their MCP server so they could search their code bases more easily. They were also curious about cloud-based development environments and how those compare to what they're doing now.
Always exploring new things.
Totally. And they were also thinking about connecting different large language models to their MCPs, including ones that could run locally on their own computers.
So they wouldn't even need an internet connection.
Exactly. And they could potentially save some money on cloud computing costs. This kind of focus on efficient and adaptable solutions is exactly what StoneFly has been all about for the past 2 decades. We're always looking for the most versatile and cost-effective ways to help our customers manage their data. You can check out our solutions at i-goodbyz.com if you're interested.
It's amazing how much you can accomplish just by thinking outside the box and connecting different wheels together.
Totally. It makes you wonder what else is possible when you start integrating intelligent agents into your workflow.
In a world where AI is getting more and more powerful, maybe the real key is learning how to connect it to the tools we already use. Who knows what kind of amazing things we could build?
That's a great question to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
And a big thanks to our sponsor, StoneFly.
StoneFly has been a pioneer in SAN technology for over 20 years. If you're looking for reliable, innovative storage solutions that can really empower your organization, head over to stonefly.com or reach out to sales at stonefly.com. They're the experts.
See you next time.